Patti Clark's joined us. See, I thought you were lying this whole time about a wife. When we look at these things from all these so many thousands of years ago, their culture and the way they did things is completely different.
Yeah, completely.
You didn't live in the year 932 BC,
Yeah.
or you would have a whole different outlook on this story.
I mean, he did ask how he felt being compared to Saul, and I was like, I've had moments when I want to throw a spear across the room at someone.
Is his name Bryan? You think that we can assume today that tornadoes, famines, natural disasters, could that be a part of God pouring out judgment?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say...
This is Talking Truth. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Back to the Bible, Talking Truth. I am Dan Whitney, as always, joined with Bryan Clark, who's here every week with me, and his wife, Patti.
Oh, yeah.
Patti Clark's joined us. It's unbeliable. How'd you get her out of that?
Unbelievable. You know, I pay her enough money.
See, I thought you were lying this whole time about a wife. And we finally see
Most people do.
He's
A lot of people
Columbo.
in church wonder if I
He's like
really
the show,
do have a wife.
Like the old show Columbo. You
Yeah.
know, he always talks about
Yeah.
his wife. You never saw his wife.
Yeah. Big
Now
fan
we-
of that show.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
we actually
Yeah.
have the real
Yeah.
wife.
That's right.
I found her out front.
That's awesome.
Hey, you want to come in and be Patti?
It's Groundhog Day. So we're excited to have a Groundhog Day in the house.
What are you grilling today?
You know what? I quit grilling out on Groundhog Day. It's more for the kids, you know, so they get up and open their gifts. We open up one before Groundhog Day, and then once Groundhog Day hits, we go nuts.
That's just let
You
the kids
know?
go crazy.
Well, you know, it's their day. But also, I want to mention I have my, this is my winter fat guy outfit.
I can't comment.
Yeah, it's my winter fat guy, which I'll be honest, Patti, is strikingly similar to my summer spring fat guy outfit.
Just it has sleeves.
Yeah, this is actually from my I Give Up collection
Well,
that I have at the
Sweatpants?
house.
if you had
Yeah.
sweatpants on, you
Sweatpants
You
will
know.
come, but I don't know if you know, fat guys always wear shorts. It doesn't matter.
Oh.
But see, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. In the winter, it goes to a sweatshirt and shorts, and in the summer, it's
Okay.
a sleeveless shirt and shorts.
okay.
So, anyway.
Wow.
And I'm wearing a thong, so that's always nice. Yeah, don't get excited. It started out as boxer shorts. All right, listen, let's get serious. All right, this is a great show, Talking Truth. As we get close to the end of our series on 2 Samuel, we want to hear from you. This is one of my favorite parts that we do. We do Q&A. A lot of people have questions about the faith. A lot of people have questions about Christianity. We'd love to take the questions. I mean, I have questions. I ask Bryan. The Bible literally encourages us to ask questions. Don't take anybody's word for it. Ask questions. And so we have a Q&A episode coming up, and we are going to take your questions. And I will do it about what we've been talking about or any other question that you got. Please, nothing personal about wardrobe or anything like that. Let's keep it Bible questions. Anyway, drop a question in the YouTube comments or send it to us at Talking Truth. Talking Truth, just all TALKNTRUTH.com. TalkingTruth.com. So, Bryan, chapter 21.
Sometimes leadership means
Sorry,
cleaning
Patty.
up someone
Sometimes I'm an
else's
idiot. I just
messes.
like
Listen, you two.
I
I was a little afraid of this. All right.
All right, here goes
I'm going
Bryan.
to sit between you. Sometimes leadership means cleaning up someone else's messes, and sometimes we are misunderstood for doing the right thing. But it's also true that sometimes our courage can inspire others to do the right thing and to slay their own giants. We want to talk about all that in this episode from 2 Samuel chapter 21. Officially, the chronological development of the story of David ends with chapter 20. The last 4 chapters are considered an appendix, which was actually common in the Hebrew narratives. They provide an overview of David's life and remind us of things we can learn from his story. For example, at some point in the past, there was a 3-year famine in the land. In the ancient world, God often communicated his favor with rain and crops and peace in the land. and his disfavor with drought and plagues and famine. So David seeks God to learn the reason for the famine. God tells him it's because of bloody Saul. Sounds like a character out of a Western movie. Specifically, he's referring to what Saul did to the Gibeonites. All the way back to the days of Joshua, peace was made with the Gibeonites. They were a peace-loving people who were allowed to stay in the promised land in exchange for labor they would provide. This agreement was honored for generations, till Saul became king and went off on one of his bloody rampages. If you recall, at one point, Saul slaughtered 85 priests in cold blood for no reason. Apparently, in another angry rant, he turned on the Gibeonites and broke the agreement and killed men and women and children, causing the reputation of God to the Gibeonites to be distasteful. God told David that the famine was a judgment for the evil Saul had done. So David, who was jealous for the reputation of God, asked the remaining Gibeonites what could be done to atone for Saul's sin. The agreement they reached is they wanted 7 of Saul's sons or grandsons to be executed. David, anxious to restore the reputation of God, carries out this request, and 2 sons and 5 grandsons of Saul are handed over to the Gibeonites to be put to death to atone for Saul's evil. It was not possible to determine exactly when this happened, but likely it was early in David's reign as king. God was pleased with David's action and restored rain and food to the land. If you recall, years later when David was fleeing from Jerusalem, a man named Shimei attacked David, throwing rocks at him and accusing him of slaughtering Saul's family. It is likely he was referring to this event with the Gibeonites. Likely the story that was spread across the land was that David slaughtered the sons and grandsons of Saul for no reason. In reality, David was following God's orders to atone for Saul's despicable sin, but his actions were misunderstood. This story was added at the end of 2 Samuel to set the record straight and to restore David's reputation. Saul made the mess, but God called David to clean it up. There's another story in chapter 21 involving 4 sons of Goliath who were seeking to kill David in revenge for killing their father. They too were giants and warriors like their father. The text tells us that David fought them courageously, but eventually became weary from battle. So Abishai stepped in with others and bravely killed the Philistine giants in David's name. The idea is that David's courage as a faithful leader inspired others to step up and face giants to win a victory for Israel. Contrary to fearful Saul, David's courage to slay Goliath inspired others to do the same, bringing peace in the land. As we've seen, David was not a perfect king, but contrary to Saul over the 40 years of his reign, he was mostly a courageous leader who turned the nation back to God. But David's failures left the people still longing for the perfect king who would ultimately set them free. Of course, they would have to wait another 1,000 years until that perfect king would come. But before we are too quick to judge Saul, it's good to remind ourselves that we are Saul in this story. I mean, we're the ones who messed up and sinned against God. It was the perfect king who would have to come and clean up our mess by atoning for our sin on the cross, that he might pour out his blessing on us. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So let's bring in Dan and Patti. Let's talk about this. So how does it feel to be compared to bloody Saul?
First of all, I used to live next to some Gibeonites, and they were very good people.
They're very nice.
The Gibeonites.
Mm-hmm.
They always fought with the Mennonites.
Oh.
The Gibeonites.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Careful how much you laugh at this stuff.
Okay.
You only encourage them.
Well, some people just need to be encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the Mennonites, they partied like it was 1799. It was unbelievable. Now, listen, here I have a question, and this isn't a prepared question or anything, but just as someone that's reading the Bible and they're investigating Christianity, I mean, that's what this show is about. I just want to let people know that Jesus is the truth, And we're not talking about the religion. We've gone over this before. It's about the truth and a relationship with Jesus Christ and what he does for you and how he changes your life and changes you from the inside out. But when you read this story, I mean, as a human being, you're thinking to yourself, I get it. Saul had to be punished. I mean, he's slaughtering innocent people. But Saul's sons and grandsons had nothing to do with what Saul did. Why would God allow David to kill them?
Well, I would say not even just allowed David. It was what was required to atone. And it's interesting, that word atone is the same one that's used for the atonement, Yom Kippur.
Right.
So it's like he is shedding blood to atone for that sin. But I think, the ancient world was really violent. It was really bloody. And basically, for there to be peace in the land, there had to be clear laws and people keeping those laws. And when they broke those laws, then there had to be consequences. So these are innocent men, women, and children who lived under an agreement that God's people made with them.
Right.
And then Saul slaughters men, women, and children, in essence, in the name of God, because he was God's covenant king. So something has to be done to send a message that this isn't what God's like, and that's not what he wanted. So it is a bit shocking to our sensibilities.
Right.
But you just have to understand the ancient context, and in order to prevent more of the same.
Right. That's kind of the point that you can get across better than me. When we look at these things from all these so many thousands of years ago, their culture and the way they did things is completely different.
Yeah, completely.
Than what we are today. So I'm glad you said that, because people want to know, why would that be? And that's why when people read the Bible, they don't, a lot of times they read it like, well, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, but you didn't live in the year, 932 BC.
Yeah.
When all this was going on, or you would have a whole different outlook on this story.
Yeah, and keep it in mind, Saul was king. He wasn't just some Joe Schmo. He was king, and he used the power God gave him to do great evil. So it wasn't unusual in those days that the king's family then would be held responsible for that behavior, because what's at stake is God's reputation, because Saul completely misrepresented who God is. So it is shocking to us, but it was consistent with the way things were done in the ancient world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I brought that question up.
It's a good question.
So these last 4 chapters that we're talking about in 2 Samuel are going back to look at things in David's life that weren't recorded before?
Right. So there's a ton of stuff that would have happened that we know nothing about. So the last 4 chapters as an appendix just goes. So if you're reading it, it gets confusing, because we would expect the story to keep going. But this is going back somewhere under David's reign and something that happened that we didn't know anything about. But at the end of the book, it's trying to straighten out. You think about it, we call it the law of the first readers. The first people to read this would have probably still had questions about David's reputation and certain rumors. So the first readers could have read this, and it would have straightened out some things that were confusing to them.
Yeah, so they came back and, well, this is what happened. So they wrote the appendix about this is the consequences of that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it does get kind of confused. Like you say, average person just reading through the Bible, a lot of this stuff gets confusing pretty fast.
Right.
And that's why we're here.
Well, I have questions, just like, do you have any questions?
Do I have questions?
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, did it have to be his sons or grandsons in sort of like in the Passover where the Israelites were leaving Egypt and it was the firstborn son that was taken?
I don't.
Is it kind of
yeah,
like
I
that?
see what you're asking. I don't think it necessarily connected to
Okay.
that as much as a king was a monarchy and
Okay.
it was the family of the king
So they paid
that
the price.
that passed on from generation
Okay.
to generation. So the Gibeonites are the ones that actually determine this is what we want
Okay.
to atone for this. So when you think about it, when you think of the slaughter, they were pretty reserved in terms of what they asked in return. Seven people in exchange for however many
Yeah.
of their family members Saul killed. But
Okay.
I think it's more those in the kingly line. Saul did it. His family needs to pay.
Okay.
Right. And Saul, man, Saul was just like,
Well, I mean, he did ask how he felt being compared to Saul, and I was like, I've had moments when I want to throw a spear across the room at someone.
absolutely.
So I can't judge.
Is his name Bryan?
Oh boy, I'm pretty quick. That's why I'm still here today.
Snags it right out of the air every time.
It's, could that also be kind of like a foreshadowing of Jesus shedding his blood for the sins of the world?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Another foreshadow, the Old Testament. That's the cool thing. If you're listening to the show, the whole Old Testament is a foreshadowing of the coming Savior and what he's done for us. And
Yeah.
so this is another part of that.
Because
Absolutely.
somebody has to pay.
Absolutely.
So
I think the atonement language is very intentional in this, that atoned for the sins of Saul as a foreshadowing.
I think that was what I was I didn't say it well. What I was kind of trying to say with the Passover is with the first, because that was an atonement for their sin against Israel. And so, yeah, I didn't say it quite
Yeah, gotcha.
how I meant it.
Yeah.
Well,
Good.
Well, when you read that, like that question I asked about, man, why would those grandsons, they had nothing to do with it. But when you go back in that culture and what was going on, why God had him do that, I mean, when you start to notice, man, God he's fair. He's just. Absolutely.
He is just.
Totally.
I think we become so accustomed to the grace of God. We read through the Bible and we take grace for granted. What we're shocked by
Right.
is those moments when God steps in with justice, and then we think somehow that's unfair. Because we've come to presume upon grace. But the reality is that was simply justice for evil that was done.
Absolutely. And, it's easy as an American Christian to sit in your house in front of your fireplace and go, oh, that's horrible. Why would he do that? But you've got Christians getting their heads cut off in Syria and the Middle East. I'm sure that they would be very happy for that kind of justice.
Yeah.
So you're not in somebody else's shoes right there. Let me ask you this. You think that we can assume today that tornadoes, famines, natural disasters, could that be a part of God pouring out judgment on certain areas of the country or our nation? Or
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say generally no.
okay.
It was a different covenant. It was a different time. And God, the promises of obedience came back with crops and rain and physical blessings because they lived in a physical land. They were God's physical people in a way that's different than who we are as the spiritual people of God. So like the United States is not the modern day Israel.
Right.
Earthquakes and droughts and all that are more just life in a broken world. I wouldn't be dangerous to read things into it because it's not so different than somebody in your family diagnosed with cancer or a child dying or whatever. It's like we don't want to start reading into that something that isn't really there.
Right. So people that are like, I told you shouldn't have said that, and that tornado come through here. That's because you said something like that. So that's not, you see a lot of that. So.
And preachers have tried to do that over the years, and it's just not biblically correct.
Right.
Well, I think too, with that, people kind of turn that around and then try to blame God because they don't want to. I mean, God's obviously in control of the weather, but it's not. They want to have a place to put the blame or the,
they
the
want to
sorrow
blame,
or whatever.
Yeah, they want to blame God for it.
Yeah.
The other part of that text then gets into David fighting Goliath's sons. So that's another thing. Like, we had no idea he had sons or that fight even took place. And whether David was older, so he didn't have the strength, or whether just fighting for his sons wore him out, but Abishai had to come to the rescue with some others. But you think about that all the way back in chapter 17 of 1 Samuel, we fell in love with David when, as a shepherd boy, he took on Goliath.
Right.
And nobody else would. The professional soldiers wouldn't. But now at this point, it's like David's courage had so inspired others that they had the courage to take on the giants. And I think that's part of the lesson in that chapter, is David's faith encouraged others to take big steps of faith and take on their giants.
Yeah, and that happens, like I said earlier, that happens today when you see somebody step out faithfully to do something and take some arrows, and you're like, man,
Totally.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? That encourages me to go out and do. That's what it's all about. That's pretty awesome.
Okay, now I'm going to tell you a little secret. It's not really a secret because it's in the text, but most people don't know this, and you might want to use this in one of your comedy routines.
Okay. I'll end with this.
That Goliath's four
This will be my big
sons
closer. Do what?
had 6 fingers on both hands and 6 toes on both feet.
So did my Uncle Delbert.
Mm-hmm. I thought he was related.
Why do we know? Why do we need to know that, though?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure what the value in the text is, other than they were just these
Different.
strange
They were
giants.
just tall, inbred morons. Basically what it was. Big
They
ears.
But
probably
it-
had
it
crossed
is-
eyes.
Yeah, it's almost like something out of a bad movie, but it is kind of Sasquatch-like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is strange information to know.
The other thing that's interesting in that story is it talks about the son that was fighting David, probably was the oldest son of Goliath, had a new sword. And so the question would be, well, what's the point of that? And the point of that is, if you remember, because David took his dad's sword as a
Right.
souvenir.
That's right.
So typically swords were passed down to oldest sons. So he had a new sword because David had his dad's sword. And that's just part of the drama in all that.
There's got to be some reason why the writer, who wrote,
Yeah, that's a big question. It was probably put together by a variety of editors, is what they think.
yeah.
Wrote
so-
First and Second Samuel, yeah. So it was originally one book.
okay.
Then we divided it.
But just the fact they would put in there about that, maybe they just thought it was something funny or
Yeah, I
something.
You're like-
I mean, you never know.
It
We
is
need to give
interesting.
Dan something to talk about.
To give us something to talk about on this show. That might have been it. All right. Do you have any closing thoughts on this?
Well, I think there's so many things we don't know.
Right.
This just reminds me, how many other things happen that we know nothing about?
Right.
You know, Saul's referred to as, I called him Bloody Saul. The text call is Bloody House. But it's like, this was a really bad guy who I think there were probably a lot of stories like this that we don't know anything about.
Maybe the guy that wrote that was English. Ah, that bloody soul.
You think? Hadn't thought about that
I
angle.
thought the first time I
That's
read
just
it.
the way he said that bloody soul in the bloody
Yeah,
house.
maybe.
You never know.
King James.
Maybe not.
King James. Well, here's,
But I think, just to answer your question, I think at the end of the day, David and Saul were very different. They both
Absolutely.
messed up, but David really was a man after God's own heart. And most of his life, he lived courageously for the reputation of God. And I think that's inspiring.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good lesson as we wrap this up that you're never too far gone. I mean, all the things that David got into and did wrong, a man after God's own heart, which gives all of us total encouragement. And then the other thing I get out of this is, man, just if you step out and defend the faith and defend for what and stick up for what you believe in, it's going to give other people encouragement to do the same thing. Don't hide in your house. When you get a chance to get out there, God will open up a path for your conversation to start. Drop a couple seeds, and next thing you know, somebody will see you doing it and they'll go, man, I want to do that too. So those are some good points that I think we learned from this episode. So anyway, thanks for listening to Talking Truth. And 2 weeks, we'll be back with another episode. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. Any question that you have about the Bible, Christianity, not about where I get these cool sweaters. Amazon.com if you like. I'm only kidding. You can't get these. These are... Anyway, send your comments or your questions to talkandtruth.com. That's talk, the letter N, with truth.com. And thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Patti. And
Thanks for
Patti
having me.
You'll be with us one more time.
Yes.
Yeah, we got you
Yeah.
one more time. All
Yeah.
right. You should let her do the lesson, and then we'll ask the questions.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right. We'll see you in in 2 and 2. 2 and 2. Get her done.
Happy Groundhog Day.
Happy Groundhog Day. I'm so sorry. Happy Groundhog Day to all the ladies.
All the ladies.
Great.
Whatever that means.
Get her done.